Today's topic for our class is female reproductive system. To start with the topic, first we should have a clear idea regarding what are the main female reproductive organs and their hormones. Before starting with the hormones and their secretions and the structures or the organs involved in the female reproductive system, we have to keep it in mind that this system is more so controlled by the higher centers, hypothalamus and cerebral cortex. But to have a slight idea regarding the reproductive system of the female, we have to have the control of the reproductive cycle and coordinate the ovarian and uterine cycles. So, to start with the topic, the hormones responsible for the female reproductive cycles, they control the reproductive cycle, coordinate the ovarian and uterine cycles. Okay. The main hormones which are responsible for this system is FSH. To be more precise, FSH stands for follicular stimulating hormones. Function of FSH is to stimulate the follicular present in the ovary and resulting into their development. Another important hormone of which is responsible for this system is LH, standing for luteinizing hormone. Main function of luteinizing hormone is it maintains the structure and is responsible for the secretory functions of corpus luteum. Another important hormone for this system is estrogen. They have multiple functions which will deal with a separate class. Okay. Another important function is progesterone. Both their hormones play an important role in their menstrual cycle also. Another important function is it stimulates the endometrial growth and secretion. The different female reproductive organs, main sex organ involved in the reproductive system of female is ovary, that is known as female gonad. It is responsible for the growth and formation of the ovum. Another important structure involved is the uterine tube, fallopian tube and oviduct. Okay. The three main parts of this is the infundibulum, ampulla and isthmus. Okay. This is the diagrammatic view of how the ovary is placed and supported by the different organs, and when we take a cross section of the ovary, we can see the structure present in the ovary. This is the cross section taken from here, and we can see the elaborate view of the ovary, and this ovary is responsible for the ovulatory cycle plus the hormone released from the ovaries, and the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary are responsible for the cycle taking place in the uterus, that is the menstrual cycle. Okay. Regarding the uterus, it is the muscular organ responsible for providing mechanical protection, support, nutritional support. It is responsible for the removal of waste for the developing embryo and fetus. It is mainly supported by the broad ligament and 3 pairs of suspensory ligaments. The main membranes present inside the uterus or the uterine wall consist of 3 layers. Okay. The first one is myometrium. It is the outer, which is the muscular layer, endo, inner layer, a thin layer, and glandular mucosa. Perimetrium, outer layer, and incomplete serosa continuous with the peritoneum. This is the site of implantation of the developing embryo, and the 3 parts of the uterus is the fundus, body and the cervix. Now, what are the functions of the ovary? It is mainly responsible for the production of a mature oocyte capable of fertilization and embryonic development. Another is production of ovarian steroids, mainly estradiol and progesterone. Production of gonadal peptides, inhibin and activin. They have important role regarding the menstrual cycle or the reproductive phase of the female, which is in the range of 15 to 45 years. Okay, the main functional unit of the ovary is the follicle. What are follicles? Follicles are composed of the oocyte, the granulosa cells and the theca cells. They are present in a number of different stages of growth. Okay, the primordial follicle, primary, secondary and antral follicles, pre-ovulatory or the Graafian follicles. After the pre-ovulatory follicle ovulates, release its egg, it forms the corpus luteum. This is the stage that takes place on the 14th day of the menstrual cycle or the ovulatory cycle. Now we are mainly concerned with the study of the growth of the follicles, which takes place from 1st to 14th day of the ovulatory cycle. Okay, in case of ovulatory cycle, the cycle mainly comprises of 28 days, which is divided into two phases, follicular phase and post-ovulatory phase. Okay, in case of follicular, we see the growth of the follicles from the primordial follicle to the Graafian follicle, and all these growth takes place in from 1 to 14 days with the help of different hormones which we have previously seen, FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone, but the main role in their development is taken by the follicle stimulating hormone. The follicles which are present in the ovary, they are present right at the time of the birth of the female baby. No new oocytes or oogonium are formed after birth. They are present right from the birth. In case of their development, number of follicles or the primordial follicles, they degenerate. Only across 3 to 5 million oogonia differentiate into primary oocytes, rest degenerates. This takes place during early development, before puberty. Oocytes become surrounded by squamous epithelial cells to become primordial follicles, and this primordial follicles, they get arrested at the prophase of meiosis 1. This is a special point to be remembered, that at what stage the primordial follicle gets arrested. It is the prophase of meiosis 1, that is diploid or 2n, that is number of chromosomes is 46 or 23 pairs of chromosomes are present. The special feature to remember or to recall in this follicular phase is, this is the oocyte surrounded by the follicular cells. As the mitotic division takes place, there is formation of new follicular cells, and they get mitotically divided and surround it and forms the granulosa cells. This is the oocyte which is diploid. Later on, a theca layer is formed, that is seen in the dark color. Okay, and this is the granulosa cells, this is oocyte, and separating the zona pellucida is the layer which separates the granulosa cell and the oocyte. This all takes place within 1 to 8 days. Okay, and their formation, what are the functions? So the cholesterol present inside the granulosa cells, in the presence of local androgen hormones in the ovary, converts this into the estrogen. So this estrogen plus the follicular stimulating hormones coming from the anterior pituitary are responsible for further growth and maturation. And in the case of this primordial follicle, when it reaches to the primary follicle going to get converted into secondary follicle, the further meiotic division takes place. So this is the stage seen in the primary follicle, where it is an oocyte, single layer of follicular cells. These are the primordial follicles which are present right at the time of birth. This is the growth taking place of the single ovum. So this is the story of the single ovum, okay, which takes place in a month during the reproductive phase of the female, which is from 15 to 45 years of age. This is the theca layer, zona pellucida, granulosa and ovum. This is the story of the primary follicle. which gets converted into secondary follicle. This secondary follicle again comprises of theca follicula, granulosa cells, zona pellucida, and here the important differentiating feature between the two are the cavities which come into occurrence. These cavities, they are filled with the hyaluronic acid. This cavity again increases in size and results into the mature Graafian follicle. So this cavity known as antrum. Now this takes the bigger space, okay. Now granulosa cells, they take the lesser space. Outer covering is formed of the theca layer, theca externa and theca interna. Now here at the time of Graafian follicle formation, the estrogen level and the FSH level continues to decrease, and due to negative feedback mechanism reaching to the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary, their level will go down and the level of LH and progesterone will increase. At that particular time, when the LH surge increases, this ovum comes out, and this is known as ovulation time, where the ovum is released from the ovary, and this is ready for fertilization. The meiotic division first has completed and it has become a haploid nucleus. So this oocyte nucleus is haploid, ready to get fertilized. It is released from the ovary, and this release of the ovum takes place on the 14th day of the ovarian cycle. Though the duration of the ovarian cycle may vary from 28 to 40 days, but the first 14 days are fixed, that is from the primordial follicle to the Graafian follicle, the duration will remain fixed of 14 days. On day 13th or 14th, there will be peak or surge of luteinizing hormone, that is known as LH surge. And on the day of 14th, the ovulation takes place and the ovum comes out. Okay. This is the story, that is 3 stages of ovarian follicle can be identified following puberty. Okay. Each follicle contains one oocyte. Primary follicles, very much in number, located in the periphery of the cortex. We have seen single layer of squamous follicular cells surrounding it. Growing follicles, early, late, secondary, or the Graafian or the antral follicle. Mature follicle takes place. So these are the pictures which can be seen: follicular cells, granulosa cells, thecal cells. These are the different stages. So one should be clear when the question is asked regarding the ovarian cycle or the menstrual cycle. They all, both the cycles, they are controlled and regulated by the hormones released from the anterior pituitary, which is controlled by the master gland, that is the hypothalamus. So the female reproductive system is controlled by the higher central, that is the CNS. Mainly the cerebral cortex is responsible for its control, which give order or command to the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus releases the gonadotropin releasing hormone. This will affect the anterior pituitary, specifically affecting the gonadotropes, which will release the 2 hormone LH and FSH. FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone, LH stands for luteinizing hormone. First 14 days is influenced by the follicle stimulating hormone, and rest of the 14 days they are influenced by the luteinizing hormone, depending whether the ovum released is fertilized or not fertilized. If the ovum released is fertilized, then the growth and the development of the fetus and embryo will take place. If the fertilization does not take place, then there will be menstrual bleeding and menstrual cycle will take place. Okay, follicle, development of ovulation and luteinization. Estrogen, progesterone, they are both responsible for this cycle, but another important is inhibin, which is responsible for negative feedback mechanism that will affect the release of estrogen and FSH from the anterior pituitary on the 7th or 8th day of the follicular phase. So this is what an axis? This is hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis. Gonadotropin hormone is released in a pulsatile manner, stimulating the synthesis and release of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. They act through its receptor on the pituitary gonadotrope, specifically the anterior pituitary, and stimulating the production of phospholipase C. This is the pathway that causes the gonadotropin release. Okay, this is the mechanism by which the action of FSH on the granulosa cells take place. Okay, ATP converting into cyclic AMP, pKa and Krebs cycles, FSH alpha and beta receptor mechanism taking place. How the ovarian estradiol production takes place. With the help of theca cells and granulosa cells, the cholesterol present in the granulosa cells in presence of the local androgens helps in the conversion of this cholesterol into the estrogen production in the ovaries. And this is the picture of the luteinizing hormone, how the luteinizing hormone is produced and responsible for the androgen formation. This is follicle stimulating hormone in the presence of aromatase, resulting into the hormone formation. Okay, androgen responsible for estradiol or estrogen. Progesterone regulation is seen or produced from the theca cells, mature granulosa cells, and from the corpus luteum. It is depending on the fertilization of the ovum. If the fertilization takes place and pregnancy results, then it is responsible for maintaining of pregnancy. Okay, and from the corpus luteum, that is the remnants present in the ovary after the release of ovum. In this case, the gonadotropin induced expression of stereotonic acute regulatory protein. This is the side chain cleavage. Okay. What are the other actions seen by the estrogen or estradiol? It has important actions in a number of other tissues, not only in ovaries. It causes proliferation of uterine endometrium. Now simultaneously we will study the effect of these hormones on uterus. Okay, so it is mainly responsible for proliferation of uterine endometrium. Okay, so the innermost layer, that is the basal layer, that proliferates, makes a red carpet for the fertilized ovum to come and get implanted. Okay, if the implantation or the fertilization does not take place, then the menstruation takes place, and if the fertilization takes place, then the uterus is prepared for the implantation. It increases the contractility of the uterine myometrium, stimulates development of mammary glands, stimulates follicular growth, granulosa cells proliferation. Effect on bone metabolism, hepatic lipoprotein, genitourinary tract, mood and cognition, important function. Why the females are more vulnerable to mood changes or mood swings, and these mood swings or changes are seen during the menstrual cycle. So premenopausal syndrome, okay, can be seen due to the change in the levels of estrogen. Effects are mediated through the intracellular estrogen receptors alpha and beta, and possible membrane effects. What are the actions of progesterone? They exert a positive and negative feedback effect on gonadotropin synthesis and its release. Acts on many tissues similar to the estrogen, not only the ovaries but also other tissues it affects. It stimulates the secretory activity of the uterine endometrium. it inhibits the contractility of the uterine myometrium because it is responsible for continuation of pregnancy. So it inhibits the contractility of the uterine myometrium. So it has to conserve the pregnancy. It stimulates the memory growth. Actions of progesterone are mediated through an intracellular P receptor which acts as a transcription factor. So this is the hormonal regulation of oogenesis and ovulation. Okay, here this is in coordination with the menstrual cycle also. So you need not to confuse with the follicular phase of the ovulatory cycle. That is a separate story. Menstrual cycle is a separate story. Menstrual cycle taking place in the uterus. Ovarian cycle is the follicular phase taking place in the ovaries. But simultaneously they are controlled by FSH, LH, estrogen and progesterone. The duration of both the cycle is normal or average is 28 days but may vary in some persons. This is normal physiological range. Okay. So, but the first 14 days of both the cycles are fixed. On the 14th day, the ovulation takes place. This is the story of the ovarian cycle, the primary follicle, primordial follicle, which gets converted into mature follicle, release of ovulation, formation of this yellow colored corpus luteum. It is responsible for the formation of progesterone. Okay, here the progesterone comes into action. This is the endometrial changes taking place in the uterus, and this prepares the uterus for further implantation of the embryo if fertilization takes place. If not, then the menstrual bleeding is seen. So stratum basilis, this is the layer in which there are spiral arteries can be seen and the blood is slotted off. Okay. The first 5 days is considered as the menses or the menstrual bleeding. The take home message for today's class will be the hormonal regulation of oogenesis and ovulation. So the most important message or the take home message for today's class is we have seen the follicular phase of the ovulatory cycle. This follicular phase takes place simultaneously, the changes occurring in the uterine wall also. Both these changes, they are affected by the estrogen and progesterone simultaneously, depending on whether the released ovum is fertilized or not. The future changes take place. If it gets fertilized, then the uterus will welcome for the implantation and further growth and pregnancy. If the fertilization does not take place, then there will be menstrual bleeding. This bleeding will be considered as the first day of the cycle, and the duration of the menses may vary from 5 to 6 days. Okay, thank you.